You're listening to the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Last Call, where Kevin, Wendy, and Brent talk about anything and everything that couldn't quite squeeze into the regular show. Today we talk about Other Space, iZombie, Community, Salem, The Almighty Johnsons, Orphan Black, and Continuum. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's see what Kevin's got for us.
Alrighty, got a couple of things to talk about this week. First off, just a quick mention of the show Other Space. Had the season finale, 8 episodes. Last episode entitled simply Finale. I've been the one keeping up on this thing. I know it wasn't really a hit with my co-hosts here. I've seen a couple of you from our listening community mention it. Just to basically recap, the show didn't change much. I mean, if you watch the first couple of episodes and you don't like that style of comedy or the actors, it's not going to radically change over the rest of the episodes. It's like any comedy. A couple of them in there really, had some good knee-slapping moments. A couple others were yawners, as happens with comedies. I enjoyed it. Kind of, silly, fun show for me. So I'm hoping, I haven't heard anything from Yahoo on whether or not it'll come back for a second season. I do give them credits being a web-only show. As many of you know, I do share on my social media when I'm watching shows, which use the tags or the hashtags or the show's official Twitter account or something. A couple of the actors have retweeted me. Yahoo Screen has, retweeted or mentioned, hope you like the show or something. So they certainly are trying to create some buzz there, but they haven't announced anything officially yet. So, hey, quirky comedy. If you haven't been keeping up on those, you might like it, but it's certainly not like it's a groundbreaker or the funniest thing ever. Asking me for better comedies, I'd go with the non-genre Kimmy Schmidt, but it still is certainly an enjoyable show.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I just saw that one episode and then just time didn't add up for me to make any more for it.
Yeah, Kimmy Schmidt is awesome. I didn't really buy into this. You know that from my first review of the first episode. Just didn't, none of the actors really sold me. The characters didn't sell me. The acting was a little weird. The sets and the props were horrible. So I just kind of gave up. But then again, I think, that's not to say that combination of things wouldn't work for me because, I also watched Space Janitors, which started out kind of rough like that too. But at least I think I hooked into the actors and the characters a little more with Space Janitors. So and some of the jokes were a little better for me in the first episode. So I'm glad to hear, in one way, I'm glad to hear that I haven't really missed anything when you say that if you didn't like the first couple of episodes, you probably won't like the rest. I'm also glad that you did enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's mainly the point to make was, unlike some shows, you sample the first couple and you wonder, did it get a lot worse, a lot better? This was a pretty consistent one. In those first couple of episodes, if you don't find them entertaining or funny, as Brent said too, you got to be comfortable with a very low budget approach to a show. For 8 approximately 20-minute episodes, it's not like it's a big time commitment if you like comedy or certainly genre comedies. I certainly would put it on the recommend list. And I do hope it comes back, but haven't heard anything there yet. The other item to mention was just talking about enjoying iZombie. You've heard on our podcast a promo for the iZombie podcast. And this week I got a chance to guest host with Robin and Stephanie there, talking about the episode we covered in our regular show this week, the Dead Rat, Live Rat, Brown Rat, White Rat one. So if you want a much longer discussion of it, follow the link in the show notes. And again, I do recommend this podcast. They've had a few of the actors and a couple of the writers from the show on, not just for interviews, but actually the fun side, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, of having them on to actually talk about that specific episode, which is kind of fun when you get a celeb or somebody from the show to do more than just, do an interview, and they're actually talking about things that occurred and their thought on the characters and other people in the show. I think you might enjoy listening to it. They do a good job covering it there.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's always nice to get the actors going sort of in depth and beyond the typical press tour kind of stuff.
No, it's good to hear. I think I actually will listen to this. I'm not, I know this is bad for me to say, since I co-host this show and I edit so many podcasts and work on this feed, but I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. There are a couple that I listen to regularly. This isn't one of them, but I think I'm going to check this one out. Not to say that I'm only going to check it out because Kevin's on it, but I'm going to check it out because I like this episode of iZombie so much, so it sounds kind of interesting to me.
Well, there you go. Fun stuff. Looking forward to how they finish out the season. And that'll do it for me this week.
All right. Wendy, what do you have for us?
Well, I wanted to talk about the season 6 finale of Community, which it's the end of the school year. The Community gang has fulfilled their mission as the school is going to continue on. So it's really a bottle episode. They're sitting in the study group room, and everyone's sort of spinning what might be the next season, if there is one. And there's sort of a running joke after Keith David tells everyone he's going to work for LinkedIn. He's moving to California, and they ask, "Will you be back?" And he said, "Maybe, probably," and, pregnant pause. And then Annie gets a job interview for an internship with the FBI. Abed decides he's going to California because that's where filmmakers go. And you have Jeff sort of dealing with the reality of his life, which is he's now a professor teaching at a community college. And, he's not in his 20s anymore. He has to kind of grow up and face the growing up bit. So for me, I liked the idea of it. At a couple of points, it was almost too meta for me. And I even made a note at one point. It was like, did they even have a script? Were they just improving? And they even called it out as improving, because it felt like sort of bad improv in a way. So I would have liked the episode to do what Community does best, which is have both tender moments, heartfelt, poignant moments with laugh out loud humor. There was the tender, heartfelt stuff when Jeff is talking about we made a community, although he's doing it with his future study group entirely of redheaded co-eds. So that part worked, but it didn't have enough laughs for me, I have to say, even though they brought Yvette Nicole Brown back to sit next to Keith David, and that was funny the way they shoved that in. So, humor, we've often said, is subjective, and for me, the humor didn't pay off as much as I had hoped it would going into the final episode.
First of all, it was great to see Shirley back, and no Troy. Darn it, I was hoping to see him too, but they had a Troy stand in there for a little bit. I actually kind of liked it. I agree with you that you want the comedy and the heartfelt stuff, but I thought both were in here. I love the setup for this, which was, Abed is still believing that they're in a TV show. And they all kind of play along with them a little bit and say, okay, well, if we're in a TV show, what are we going to do? They're talking about next year. At the end of every year, they always talk about next year. So they talk about what's we going to do next season if we're renewed, Very meta, like you said. So everybody gives it a little pitch. And a lot of the pitches were really good. And some of them were funny. Britta's, of course, was absolutely Britta and dumb. And everybody called her out on that. And, of course, Chang's was a little crazy, too. And the Deans. The Dean's ending with, of course, Jeff grabbing the Dean's hand and putting it on his bare chest. That was, of course, perfectly Dean as well. I also loved the heartfelt, and not the scene you were talking about, Joel McHale's speech, but I was actually talking about the end, the serious goodbye. Where he's, Jeff is kind of sad and frustrated that everybody's leaving and that everybody seems to have their own path, and he's here and he's going to stay here for a while. But then Annie shows up, and that great scene between them, where Annie says, basically, if you want to kiss me goodbye, you better do it now before the rest of them come. And they have that very tender moment before the others show up. I thought that was really heartfelt as well. Whether or not they get renewed for another season, I don't know. But personally, I'm also kind of hoping that it's a twisted way, but I'm hoping that they don't get renewed and they do a movie, so that we can say that all along Abed's been right, 6 seasons in a movie.
Yeah, see, I didn't want to think about that too much, and maybe that's why I just kind of enjoyed it for what it was. As you said, Wendy, I was good with the over-metatization, if that's a word, that they just went so hard at it. To me, that's Community. And they still had the little tug-at-the-heart things of the fact that each of the characters' interpretations were very much that character. It reminded me why I love those characters for what they do. All their flaws and even bad natures and so forth. It was just pretty cool. And yeah, the scene between Jeff and Annie was kind of cute. I mean, it was really kind of cute. I liked the way they did that. So part of me wants to say, yeah, it was, to me, a very good season. I very much liked it. I'd like another one. But part of me is, yeah, just let's do it right and maybe just go out with a cool movie. Have Yahoo do a 90-minute, thereabouts episode and just button this thing off and know that, what it was some pretty amazing stuff and that we didn't over milk it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was happy that they dealt with the Annie Jeff stuff, but I was also glad that they recognized that really wasn't a good relationship to put together, for sure. So I like that. I think I'm with you, Brent. I think it would be cool if they do a movie and somehow manage to bring Troy and Shirley back into the mix, as well as Keith David as well, because I thought he was a good addition. And I can't remember the character's name, but the assistant to the dean, I don't remember her name. I liked her. Yeah, Frankie. I liked her too. I did like the board game tag at the end. It was like going backwards, sort of, against the trend for franchising for stuff in a way. But I would be really happy if they do a movie. The other show I wanted to talk about was Salem, because things are really heating up in this show now that John Alden Jr. is pretty much called out as the devil at this point, or the devil's carrying vessel. And Mary also learns from Tituba in a rather heated argument that John Alden, the guy who's the father of this kid, is alive. And she even goes to see John Alden and now is trying to get him on her team to help rescue this kid. We also have the doctor, whose name I'm forgetting, but last week he, learned that Mary's a witch and decided he was going team witch all the way. And this week he gets taken out into the woods by Lucy Lawless's son, who's a witch, and seems to have been thrown into a pit and probably dead. So I'm hoping that isn't what happened to him, and maybe he'll be somehow supernaturally resurrected or something, because he was a really interesting character. But things are heating up going into the season finale, which will be, I assume, a fight over this kid. I think there's 13 episodes this season, so I think there's going to be some attempts to rescue him, as well as attempts to bring forth the devil from this kid, who I'm predicting will end up dead either way by the end of the season, which is kind of the way Salem rolls.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of cool. Your descriptions, I enjoyed them. I'm about 3 or 4 episodes into season 2, so I'm almost there.
Yep, glad to see folks still talking about it. And like I said, it's certainly getting a good amount of buzz from my folks that I keep an eye on.
Well, I have a friend who I was talking to this about, because she and her husband are actually big fans of the history of that time period. And so they started watching it, and I think they did like a binge, because she was texting me about what she was seeing, and I realized, oh, you're in season 2 now. She's like, yeah, I'm almost caught up. It was like, wow, you caught up in like a week. So it is a show that can hook you. We wanted to kick off our summer rewatch of The Almighty Johnsons, and we're starting off season 3 with episode 1, which picks up right at the start of where we left off in season 2 with Gaia, who was supposed to be Frigg, but because Anders killed Helen, who was Idun, Idun was without a vessel, so she took Gaia. So that's a big problem, and it's going to stay a problem. By the end of the episode, we have the 2 prophets individually taking each Axel and Gaia away and saying, look, even though you've decided you want to accelerate your wedding and everything to sort of nullify this problem and try to be living a human life, it's probably not going to work. And it doesn't look like it is going to work, because Gaia ends up with Anders, which was disappointing, to say the least. to see happening. The other thing that was interesting was in the house, an apple tree grows, and my assumption at the time was that it was some side effect of Gaia coming into her powers, and I thought it was really clever that it turned out that it was actually Axel manifesting this tree sort of in a way to prove that things were fine. And I loved when the prophetess, I can't remember her name, says, well, no, Idun's apples are green, so it was really obvious right from the start that Gaia didn't bring forth this apple tree. And then we also have a little movement on the Ty and Dawn front, but of course, there's always a problem with these two. So Dawn actually comes to Ty's house and has a flashback memory of being in the freezer. So she continues to think that Ty is this really weird guy, which is very disappointing because I really like him. But for me, I thought this was a pretty good start to the season. And hopefully we're going to deal with this Idun Gaia problem pretty quickly. It's not going to drag on too long.
Yeah, I was really glad to see when this season started the fact that Axel and Gaia had decided, screw this destiny thing. We love each other. We've loved each other for a long time. And like she said in the car, we're going back to our flat and I'm going to sleep in your bed. And he gets all excited after he had that dream of being, this big wooden, Han Solo against the wall and living with them and in the happy domestic lifestyle that they were having together. And I was also pleasantly surprised when he proposed to her and she accepted. I'm like, yeah, cool. And then, of course, you were constantly getting those visions each one of them was having of the other. Anders and Gaia were having of each other. And, of course, at the end, with her going to his apartment, oh, boy, that doesn't look good. You need to have Mike and Michelle and their attempts at domestication. And I love him agreeing to win the contest for the shopping spree. And then, of course, going off and proving his love for her, as she says, I said I love you, you never said it back. And so he does buy all the crap that he thinks she might like and says, this is how I can tell you I love you, sort of thing. I thought that was pretty sweet. Although, the question that he had for Michelle about, what did old Loki mean by, you're the most powerful goddess? And she's like, well, I love her line about, well, maybe that's just because he remembers I kicked him in the nuts, So that was pretty cool. The Dawn Ty stuff, I totally agree. And you guys know, if you remember back, that I said that after the end of season 3 that I concluded that Ty and Dawn is one of the best romantic relationships I've ever seen on genre television, and I stand by it. So stick with the rough ride because it is pretty interesting. Poor old Zeb, of course, always being poor old Zeb and all that stuff going on. So, I have to admit though, watching these episodes now again, it's really weird. Watching Keisha Castle-Hughes playing Gaia, also at the same time watching her in Game of Thrones playing one of those snake women or whatever. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode. I was glad we're going back to it, even though SciFi wouldn't air it. We bless Netflix for having it on there so we can give it a watch. I was a little underwhelmed fairly early in the episode. I guess maybe I was expecting a little more twists and turns, but it settled in real good once we saw how they were going to be approaching it. I like that even though we know they're doomed as far as Axel and Gaia because of what's happened to her now, doomed in the sense of unlikely to be able to stay together, I like they at least tried. So we're not going to have that, what might have been if I had decided to, tempt fate and go against things. So I like that they really gave it a shot. Trying real hard. I feel bad for them, so I know they've done a good job from the story point of view that they've got me emotionally in on that. And the Ty is trying so hard, reminding me of a high school kid in love or something, trying to make things happen. It'll be interesting to watch. Your comments, Brent, have stuck with me, so I'm sticking with them. But I feel bad for him seeing what's happening to him. So it was kind of interesting to see where he goes from here. I'm not sure about the Mike and Michelle stuff. That whole thing about them, like you said, kind of getting very domesticated and comfortable. I mean, she's been entertaining because she's such you don't know what she's going to do next. So the idea that they're getting very settled And the idea that, when he won that shopping spree that he chose to get the flowers to make her happy. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I'll give it a go and see what happens from here.
Well, the thing I like about them is they're really oil and water, and they almost unintentionally bring out better things from each other too. So I don't know, that couple works for me. I like them, but I'm going to be curious what happens when he does figure out that she's got the magic stick and she's a lot more powerful than anybody knows.
Yeah, they do complement each other.
And that's it for me.
Alrighty, I've got a couple of shows I want to talk about. First of all, Orphan Black, I just wanted to mention, it was a fun episode. This is episode 7, season 3, Community of Dreadful Fear and Hate. But it also had a bit of, been there, done that sort of feel to it, because it was another one of the, let's have a clone pretend to be another clone, and it's pretending to be Allison this time, and Allison's at the, got to meet and greet people for photo ops and give a speech, and this time we'll have Cosima pretend to be Allison, because she's so awkward and she can't see without her glasses, so it'll be great comedy, and it was okay. It was entertaining, it was fun, but it also kind of felt like we've done it already, so it felt almost like they insert clone pretend to be other clone episode here sort of feel to it, which, diminished it a little bit. I did like a lot of the scenes in there. It was funny when the ex-boyfriend goes to kiss Allison, and it turns out to be Cosima dressed as Allison. Not only has he got the wrong clone, but he's got the wrong sexual orientation. So it was just kind of funny. And then at the end, or not the end, but later on, when Allison actually brings Cosima out to show her mother and says, this is my clone. And I love Cosima's look on her face when she says that. When Allison says that, she's like, well, what the? But the mother just kind of writing it off and saying, well, yeah, she does kind of look like you. She must be a half-sister. She must have had the same sperm donor that I received. When we had you, and Allison just like, yeah, mother, of course, yeah, that must be it. And I also love the, even though it shouldn't be too funny, it still was funny, the almost racist joke of the mother of, that girl was mulatto, because she's got the dreadlocks. It's just funny stuff. The stuff with Helena and Mrs. S was interesting. Their fight, where Mrs. S didn't really want to fight back, but did at one point punch her, and then just grabbed her, and there's this big hug where she's trying to say, I'm sorry, you are essentially a daughter to me because you're my daughter's sister, and all of this stuff. I thought that was pretty touching scene as well. But poor Sarah, the loss of Paul. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good episode.
Yeah, I think, and you have to give them credit, at least in my mind. Part of the reason why we're kind of all going, yeah, good episode, is because we have such high standards for this show, and they tend to do such an outstanding job with the story that when you take an episode that is basically the comic relief, or let's take a deep breath before we get back to the really serious stuff, we sometimes want to ding it a little bit. But it was very similar to a previous episode from last year. Like you said, insert the pretending to be another clone here, but getting a lot of Allison and Donnie is still very entertaining and very funny. The drug deal problem with Donnie almost getting his nose chopped off was fun, but I had to, again, because the show does things so well, had to ding it a little bit, because the idea that Allison, who is so good at taking care of details, would have the money and her signatures in the exact same envelope and somehow confuse them, or let Donnie confuse them, I have to go a long way to waive that one. So, but it made for some good hijinks. So, like we said, it was very entertaining. It was fun. And yes, the Mrs. S and Helena stuff, the Mexican meetup, the one punch hit on both sides and then the hug it out, still pretty damn good, and glad to see it happening. So, we had fun with it, but I'm also looking for some really meaty story stuff coming forward.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was trying to think about this episode, I was like, did anything happen? I was like, oh no, this was the filler episode where they had one clone pretend to be another. I kind of forgot about the Helena and Mrs. S bit, which was kind of cool. And also, I'm curious, do you think that Allison's mother really knows that they're clones, or is she sticking with her story that she's
I think
got
she's clueless.
Surrogate sperm from some.
I agree.
Yeah.
But so I was really surprised in a way that I wasn't at all surprised at how they characterized her mother and that she was disapproving of Donnie and all that stuff. It was well played, though. But it was entertaining, but it really did feel like filler to me.
The only other thing in here that I wanted to bring up was kind of important. That was Rachel and her and Cosima's lab partner showing her the book and her reacting to it and then wanting to play the game as a cover. And I love his line to her when he starts to teach her the game, and she's like, we're not really going to do this, are we? And he's, yeah, you're going to learn. If anybody walks in here, they're going to see you learning how to play this game.
Actually playing it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. The other show I want to talk about was our Continuum rewatch. We're up to episode 7 of season 3. Coincidentally, the exact same episode, season, and number of Orphan Black. Waning Minute. And this one, the first watch through and even on rewatch, not a highlight of season 3 for me. It's very much a backstory. It teaches a lot about some of the characters in Liberate and some of the things they went through. Lexa Doig's character especially, and how she kind of turned the page and decided to really go with Kugami after the place where he was hiding out and she was volunteering and helping got destroyed by the corporate Congress. As of course Kira manages to escape with her prisoner, who is the bad guy who she theoretically killed in the first or second episode of season 1, and showed up in the now in one of the holding cells of the freelancers. So we get that, a lot of flashback. Most of it was flashback, and we did learn a little bit more about how that sort of thing happens when somebody is presumed dead in the service of the CPS. You basically get a boost to your life credits and a thank you, goodbye sort of pat on the back from people, and how horrible the husband felt, because Kira's husband, at one point talking to older Alec was saying, I enjoy the life credits, but I love my wife. I want her back. I miss her. But she actually does manage, of course, to escape at the end and be rescued, of course, or otherwise the show wouldn't exist. Although, the way timelines and go, and there might be a timeline out there where she didn't survive. So, overall, not a highlight of season 3. Some good backstory, a little bit of with Curtis, and getting him locked up in a cell, a freelancer cell as well. But then at the end, escaping, and poor Alec witnessing that, thinking that he had just seen one of his fellow prisoners committing suicide, and then seeing him kill one of the guards and leave. So we get a little bit of momentum at the beginning and ending of the episode, but most of it was just backstory. So, yeah, like I said, not a highlight.
Yeah, it's funny. See, I actually on this episode, it is the backstory, but this is the one that each time I've rewatched it, which has been a couple of times now, you realize how important this is in driving the entire story of the series. Seeing what happens to Sonya here, how Kagami sets her up, positions her, and also positions what happens to the camp by putting his DNA in there, which he knows older Alec, 27-7 is going to see it, and then they're just going to light this place up, so he has to make his escape, and he sets up Sonya to become such a key player for Liberate by getting her back, convincing her to go back into that super soldier program. Yeah, it's a little bit of backstory stuff. It also creates some great, I say great, but from a storytelling view, really an impactful bit on Kira for the doubt about, what I'm doing and the corporation and all this stuff there in terms of how quickly they wrote her off and we're going to, assume she was dead and all that. It's not as exciting or cool as some of these other episodes in season 3, but it is pivotal for me. And I love watching to see the chess pieces moving in this episode and what they mean for what eventually is going to be happening in several other points in the series. So again, to me, it's kind of lay back, but it's lay back brilliance for what it all means.
Oh, I really like this episode, I guess more than you guys did, because it was almost entirely set in the future, and it was so important to Kira's sort of awakening. And you also have it paralleling the awakening, I'll call it, of Sonya, or the commitment of her to a different path from this, the gleaners, who are basically, Kagami calls them people who, they're trying to bargain, but they don't understand that they don't really have any leverage to bargain. And one day, they're just going to get taken out, which is what happened. So I really liked that. I liked that it picked right up with Curtis and how she sees Jaworski, who I think up until that point I thought was dead. So I'm curious if that's a Jaworski from one of the other timelines. But he's in the cell, and that's what triggers the whole memory, because it was all about her captivity of Jaworski and their time in the desert. So I really liked all that stuff a lot. I loved when Sonya was talking about why she had gotten out of the super soldier program, because it nudges you and it turns you into someone who just records things. You're not a witness to actual events. You don't feel what's happening as a result. And, they're being conditioned like, domestic animals. So I liked all her observations about what this technology was doing to people. And, it was very parallel to when Jaworski kept telling Kira, even if I'm in a cage, I'm freer than you are. And I liked how, she says, I'm not asleep anymore. And she decides, okay, I can't really work with these freelancers either. So to me, it was really important. And then to have that great contrast on Alec, who is completely disoriented by being a captive, and then horrified that it looks like this guy has hung himself, but he's actually just created this elaborate ruse to escape. And, this is really upping the stakes for Alec, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you guys. There were some very important moments in here. I just think that I wish there was more important moments and more story that wasn't set in the future / flashback, flash forward. I thought that dragged out a little bit too long. I guess you have to really like those characters a lot too to want to spend so much time with them. And I don't know that I was ever really a Kagami kind of guy. I don't know that I was ever really a Sonya fan either. So seeing a lot of those characters in those flashes didn't really do it for me. And I wanted Kira back in the our timeline, so to speak, and see what was going on there. But yeah, there definitely were very important events. So don't get me wrong.
Yeah, the one thing that I was trying to pay extra attention to in this episode was the husband and the bits with the husband, and to see, is he ever going to pay off in some way? And I'm still concluding he's not going to, after what I saw.
No, I agree with you. I think he's not. I think that's another lesson the show is teaching us, is that she had this life she wanted to get back to, and she's coming to the realization that she can't get back to it, and it's going to be all for naught. It's going to be essentially the equivalent of she lost her husband. I mean, she's going to become a widow, essentially, if she never can get back to that timeline. And there's a lot of people out there who have lost a spouse or lost a child and can deal with it, but she's just done it in a very different way. She's done it because she's gone into another timeline and can't get back to them.
Yeah, I meant more just his character having something to actually do with the storyline, or have some way been integral to what happened to her. He still seems like he's a bystander to all of this to me.
Well, didn't we already earlier, season 2, I think, maybe, get glimpses into the fact that he was not in on, per se. He was in on something, that there was some kind of conspiracy. We don't know how much he knew about it, but he was also, totally shocked and upset when he saw that Kira was in the execution chamber and tried to get her pulled out. So he seems to be tied to some degree in it.
Yeah, that's why I was expecting there to be more like his, because this was I think the first time he ever met Adam or Alec Sadler was when he was telling him, oh, sorry, we told you your wife was dead before, by paying you out, versus actually telling you in advance. So maybe that's why it was more throwaway.
And there's also the time when she had discovered the details and information about the time travel device and was trying to study it. And then her mind got wiped, and he quickly realized it had come from Alex Sadler because he saw him look up at Alex's floating fortress or whatever, and then kind of excused it as saying it was something he brought home.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was one of the key bits there at the end of the last season.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, too, because of how poorly the company handled telling him about what they thought was his wife's death, how much Alec kind of gave him a little extra and got him involved in some of this, too. I mean, I think there's some story there that we haven't seen.
Well, I hope so.
Well, they only have a few more episodes before the series is over.
Whether or not we'll get it, that might have to be one of those behind-the-scenes things, because with only 6 episodes, I'm not sure they'll pay that off.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all I had, too, so it was a fun discussion with you guys. Appreciate all you listeners for tuning in every week, and Kevin and Wendy for being here with me. I'll catch you next time.
Take care, gang.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
We offer several ways for you to get in touch with us. If you come to our website at tuningintoscifitv.com, you can leave a comment on any of our blog posts. There's also a link there over to our discussion forums. You can send us email at feedback@tuningintoscifitv.com. You can leave us voicemail by dialing 206-202-4182, or also on Skype at Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/tuningintosci-fi, or visit our Facebook fan page by following the link on our website.
Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV was hosted by Kevin Batchelder, Wendy Hembrock, and Brent Barrett. The theme music for Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV is by Beatnik Turtle. Used with permission. Listen to Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV on Stitcher Radio on Demand. Download the free app today at Stitcher.com. You've been listening to the Tuning Into Sci-Fi TV Last Call for episode 340, recorded June 6, 2015. Notice how I go sometimes 1, 2, 3 go, and this time I go 3, 2, 1 go. I like to vary it.
Keep us on our toes.
Keep you on your toes.
Yeah, as long as it's go at the end.
I just listen for the go.
Yeah, you could go 6, 4, 2.
Go.
You could go 7, 8, 9. Go, and we'd go.
But I have to do 3 things before to go.
Yeah, I think 3 is
switch it up
the
and
magic.
do like 2 or 4, and then you'll get us.
A, B, go. All right. Well, here we go. Then.
Go on 3, or
I'll kick it off.